Hi. So, happy Monday. We're going to get into the rest of our exercise today, and then we'll open it up. Probably should have around a half hour, if not a little bit more, of work time, depending on how long we go with the exercise. This might be a good question. Let me see. Gallery view. Can I get a show of hands? How many people are new to Illustrator? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Almost everybody. Okay, cool. That makes me know to take things a little bit slower. Kind of make sure I'm pointing things out well. Cool. The only need to know is I forgot to bring this up my last class until the end, that your essays are due next class. So I was kind of letting them know, like, oh, well, next class you want to just be working on this, but on the project too. But I figured I'd let you guys know now in case I forget later. And then next class is just going to be work day. And this is going to kind of, the critique's going to be a little fast coming up because this project actually, I believe we have a day less of working than the Photoshop or something like that. I think a day less. And today is kind of cutting into one of our 2 work days with the rest of this exercise. So anyhow, let's dive in here. I'm going to open up the page. Exercise 2. And scroll down. So we covered everything with type as well as the warp tool, correct? Should be everything we've done. Okay. So I'm going to open up my file from last time. Not sure if you guys still have it or not. I don't need all this crazy extra stuff, do I? Oh, I expanded this too. Oh boy. Oh, I got rid of my piece of the K. Oh well. So, still have something close. Oh, there's the K. Haha. Okay, that's going to be good enough for me. The next couple things we do are going to be pretty similar to what we were doing with last week in terms of, like, we have these shapes now. What are some other ways of modifying and contorting these shapes? So just as a recap, the first thing that we really focused on was type, and then transitioning that type as like an open, as like a smart object, right? That we have these controls over manipulating into these direct vector points. And then from this point on, we're now being able to modify these points individually, right? And with these Bezier curves. So we're going to kind of follow up from that notion of individually, like, modifying these vector points now that we have them. And so we did cover the blur tool, I believe, right? Or the blend tool and the smudge and different stuff like that. Those are kind of quick, easy to use things that are right in the tool panel. But we also have some fairly nice things to be exploring up in the object panel. So we could definitely take a look at those. So why don't we grab a letter to start with? I'm gonna grab this one because it's still fairly unmodified, right? It just kind of looks like a plain letter. Is it a D or is it a P? And we're gonna go up to the object menu, and we're gonna keep returning to this over time. And I want you guys to get into this notion that, oh, this is like Illustrator's vector version of applying filters, right? We have different things in here that we should be kind of taking a look at and playing with if we're trying to strive for that particular area, right? Every tool has multiple extensions for it. So the one we're going to be looking at is this. No joke, I've always called it the envelop tool. Pretty sure it's envelope, right? Yep. Pats on back on that one. There's another one in Photoshop. It was it's like when you're using the magic wand. I don't know. It's like selecting. I don't know. Contiguous. I always said continuous. It's called contiguous. I don't even know what the hell contiguous means. Okay. Sidetrack complete. The envelop distort option, we're going to go with make with mesh. And the make with mesh options here will pop up. I always say to toss on the preview. And setting these, this is kind of like establishing a smart object that you're going to be modifying that object over top of your shape, if that's an easier way to describe it, right? Once these pop up, you should start to get that realization. And then I would always lean towards having less points here. You really don't, you obviously like 1 point will kind of do the job. Probably 2 points is a little bit more because, so it all depends on the shape you're modifying. It doesn't have to be letters, but I mean, we're focusing on type. So for mine, it might be something like this. It just depends. And once you hit OK, this shape is now has that tool applied to it. Like you could deselect and reselect, it's still going to be there, right? So it's kind of like softly locked into this mode until we release it, expand it. So from that point on, it's just like vectors. We can go in with our direct selection tool, right? And click on each of these little vector points, and we can modify them. And those are going to be how the actual shape is going to take its form. Coolsies. So you could do this kind of thing to have like a letter overlay another shape or something, right? Kind of like sculpt it over top of something. So for example, if I have like a star here, I could bring this shape over and try to map it onto that star. Oh, weird. My what just happened? My ability to modify it has gone away. Huh. I don't know how that happened. But it's just another way to manipulate, right? And then once this is done, say like, oh man, you know what? This is so beautiful. Oh, I see what happened. Very interesting. So I don't know if anybody's had this happen yet, but if you double click on something using your regular selection tool, you go into this, what do you call it? This mode, isolation mode. So you can kind of see it in your layers. Everything else kind of goes gray. Then you could either go back with the arrow or just double click off to get out of that mode. But for some reason, once I've done that, my ability to modify this is gone, unless I undo. I don't know. I find that really weird. Anyway, once you say that you're satisfied with this and you want to like release it so it's back to its regular form, we would just have to go up to Object, and we could either go to Envelop to Store and hit Expand, right? It kind of places that under that option panel, or we could just do the regular Expand by having the object selected, go to Expand. Right, so it's the similar process of like, anytime we have this smart object, it's not actually vectors. If we can always expand it, right? That's kind of the mindset we should be in. Anybody hasn't gotten that to work, or? Okay. It's a little goofy of a place until you start using these things a little bit more. I would say no, but forewarning, don't try to use perspective. That's just a nightmare waiting to happen. So, okay, continuing on then. The next point of business, this is a little bit of an old tutorial, so some things I can't kind of throw in or forget, and I throw in. I think we've covered swapping stuff. So let's do this. Let's name this layer as whatever your title was called, just for the sake of it. And we're going to hide it. And then we're going to create a new layer. And we're going to call this new layer pencil and pencil knife. Kind of just creating layers based on the tools that we're going to cover, so that if you save this later, you come in and like revisit, like, oh, that's right, I use this tool. What does it do? So we could just make a shape. Doesn't really matter what shape. Okay. And I think by default, what you guys see in your tool panel is the eraser tool. The eraser tool acts kind of similar way as a brush. Like you could use your keyboard key, like Photoshop, to make that larger. You know, you can go in there and modify it, and you're actually cutting that piece out of the object. That's a quick way to kind of remove stuff. However, a lot of times you guys aren't going to be necessarily working on removing as much as it's going to be modifying. So perhaps the more useful tool is this knife tool, which is hidden under the eraser. And, oh, speaking of pencil, we didn't even use the pencil. I just had you draw something. Let's just use the pencil real quick, since this is the layer for the pencil. Grabbing the pencil basically allows you to make whatever shape you want, right? And once you let go, I guess it doesn't automatically go. Maybe you have to go back to the beginning by yourself. All right. I thought it actually snapped back. So yeah, if you do your own shape, you get close to the end, it'll give you that little circle, you let go, boom, it's a shape, right? We could actually then, down here in the tool panel, select our fill color and just throw in a fill just so we can see it better. And then we could take our knife tool, and we don't have to have anything selected with the knife tool. It's just going to really apply to everything that's in its path. So in that regard, when you use the knife tool, you really want to think about being isolated. Like if I had this other layer there, you know, you would want to lock it so you could still view it, but you're not going to modify it at the same time, right? So the thing with the knife tool is you always want to start off of a shape and you're going to cut over it. So kind of like an X-Acto knife, if you're going to cut, you know, a piece of paper with one cut, you don't start in the middle of paper and you go out because the paper is not completely cut, right? So you'd start on one side of the object and just go all the way through. Right, and you just let go. And once you've done that, you could grab your selection tool and you should be able to move it out. For some reason, maybe you can't do two pieces at once. That's weird. There's something restricted, I think, because I can go to this pickles one and do it. That cut through both. Huh. Not sure. Something to do with this star doesn't like to be cut. So it cut there. Can I cut you and cut you? Weird. So I guess you're going to have some problems like this occur once in a while. You guys get the general idea though with the cutting. Should be able to like slice things right open. This works in a better way than the scissors tool. You should all just avoid the scissors tool. I feel like maybe I should just learn more about it, but what ends up happening is, I'm just going to show you, I wouldn't even bother with it, but you have to actually click a point on a path and then another point on a path. And then the scissors tool just cuts that. But what stinks is that it's not an object. It's like an open object. You see what I mean? Like there's no, it's missing a side. And now this is missing a side. So by using the knife tool, you have that automatic like application of each is a new shape. Good. Okay, we're gonna hide that layer, make a new layer again. And what's this next one? Did that. Rectangle tool. Oh, just, right. I want to show you guys managing layers too. So we'll go on to the next thing and talk about managing layers as well. So this next one is going to be type on a path. And it's fairly simple. You could use the pen tool to make a path, or you could use the pencil, right? Just draw out the path. And I'm going to name this layer, you know, text on a path. So, yep, I just want you guys to draw out a line. I use the pencil. And then we're going to grab under the type tool, if you click and hold, there should be the option for type on a path. And with that selected, all we need to do is hover over our line, our path. We'll get Illustrator to give us that indicator that, oh, that is a path, right? And then we just click and it's going to just insert placeholder text. And if you want to, while it's selected, you know, you can increase the size or whatever you want to do. The point being is, once you have that is text and you want to have it kind of ability to modify it, we can now go back to the selection tool, right? And with this selected, I'm going to choose a different color real quick. How about dark blue? If we look in here, not only do we have, with the selection tool, not only do we have the option to like modify, right, the shape, we can move it, we can turn it, we can scale it, just like we normally would with the selection tool. But also we zoom in a little bit if we need to. You can see that there's like these little lines at the beginning and the end and at the middle. We're actually able to click on those lines and drag them. And if you start with the beginning one, that'll set like where your text is going to start typing, right? So if you want it to be the whole line, you would have to just drag it all the way to the left. The middle one is going to allow you to grab it, like click it, and you could actually flip it to the other side of the line, right? So if you wanted to have it be on the other side for some reason, that's totally doable. The other thing to note here is that every time you type on a path or use type at all, like area type tool, we can cover that in a second. It's going to remove the original object from view. So you can see our line's no longer visible, right? So if you want it to be visible, you could, copy the line before you go in here and put this on, and then you could paste it. Similar to Photoshop, how I kind of was trying to get you guys to situate in your mind that if you want to really like be compounding pieces, different tools, you could always copy stuff, make duplicate layers, and then you have that original piece to keep modifying. So I guess to nail home that topic, let's also draw a star here. Okay. And in our layers panel, let's make a new layer. And we're going to call this layer like star original. Okay. So not only can we copy this, right? We have this selected, this shape. We can go ahead and copy, Command C. But now, while that's selected, you'll see over here in the right-hand panel that we have this little color indicator of the layer showing us that we have an object selected on that layer. And if we want to move that to say that original star layer, we could just click that little indicator and drag it. And now it's on the other layer. And what's interesting is now that I have, objects or type or multiple things on multiple layers, if I were to do, like a select all, right? So everything I have is selected that it's in view. You could see that they're both those indicators are selected. So if for some reason you think you're working on one layer and you realize, oh, I drew something on the wrong layer, you could then like quite literally just drag whatever you want and reorder it, right? It's all using these little indicators here. What's also nice is that you could click this little empty circle and that targets, it shows you basically everything on a specific layer. So that could also be helpful in organizing. The biggest thing to note here, which I have multiple students each semester stumble into, and I just try to focus in on it so that you're grasping it, you don't kind of walk into that same problem, is that each of these layers has a sub-layer ability, right? So it really doesn't matter for a layer that has only one thing on it, But like the first layer when we had a bunch of letters, if we were to drop that little arrow down for it, you can see there's like probably a ton of stuff, right? And these are like every individual object on that layer. We don't need to be in that view. That's like way too overkill. We don't need that. So I don't really want anybody editing in this way. Like in the past, I've had some students go in and like rename every single subpath, and they think they're using layers. Sublayers are really just showing you what's in a layer. So you don't need to use sublayers at all. The only thing it could be helpful for is if you say you have a ton of stuff here and you're not sure where something is, say you have a bunch of stuff overlapping each other. You could go in here to use these target modes and maybe find it more easily. But other than that, you just want to be using the regular layer mode. Okay, so we have this text on a path layer and a star layer. And now we can just hide the star layer. And assuming you copied it, like I was saying before, we should now be able to just go to edit and paste in place. Except I was on the wrong layer, so we'll just need to drag that over. Right. So I still have the original star layer hidden, but I now have a copy of the star on my text on a path layer. And on here, if we now go to the type tool and click and hold, we have another option called area type tool. So it's a similar concept, but we're just, instead of on a line, we're inside of lines, like inside of an object. And so we just have to click on the actual path. We can't just click on the middle of the shape. I think we'll get an error. You actually have to like tell the program like what shape you're applying it to. So we click on it, it's going to fill. Cool. And then what's nice is that if you did keep the original or you copied it to some extent, however you want to manage duplication, we can now view that or reorganize the layers. We have the original, right? And then in this regard, like, I might want to go in here on this original star layer and now do some modification, but I don't want to ruin what's on this type layer, right? So I could just lock that layer and only like unlock the layer I'm working on. This is one thing I often see a lot of, beginners kind of not realize they can do, is if you're trying to move things around, you're accidentally clicking on background stuff or whatever, like say, for example, here I have this like background layer, and on this background layer, I just have a color, plop, right? Green is my background. Well, okay, so now I want to go in and grab the star and the text on the star. So I would like click here and drag over right? Drag over the stuff to select it. Well, if I do that right now, I'm going to move the background, right? So obviously then if I just lock that background, now I can select things together, what have you. So being able to have things on separate layers is really going to be beneficial in organizing and managing, like tweaking things. So as you go along, all these different tools we're covering, like we did type on a path, and then I had a duplicate of the same shape. So now I can go in maybe and like, type on a path as well, maybe paste that again in the back. Just like compounding stuff. what are we trying to do? Are we trying to make legible type? Are we trying to make some kind of effect? What are we doing? So it's, as we go along, we're going to keep covering more and more tools. It's trying to piece together like what your idea is and what tools you might be able to explore and trying to build that out. Okay, we covered this. Okay, so we can cover this blend tool, and at the same time, I think we'll cover the color guide, or maybe one after another. So again, we could just go ahead and hide everything, create a new layer, and call this blend mode. Okay. And then let's do this. I think this way will be a good way to structure it. Let's grab a star again, because stars are fancy. Let's go ahead and click one time without dragging. And we get to set how many points of the star. Let's go for 10. Sure. Okay, so we'll just put a star up in the top left-hand corner, kind of like, you know, off to the side. And then let us also grab another star, still in the star tool. We'll click again singly, and let's just do a regular 5-point star. And now I want you guys to change the color. And we're going to put this, like shrink it down a little bit. So we'll use our selection tool. And while we're scaling it, you'll want to hold Shift to be proportional. So we're just going to shrink it down a bit. And then we're going to put this mini regular star in the center of the other one. And as we're dragging it, we should be able to get like the smart, the guides, the smart guides to like tell us when we're right in the middle. Okay. And then all we need to do is we're going to cover this blend tool. The blend tool should just be in the left-hand panel by itself, tool panel. And all we're going to do is click one shape and click the other. That's all we need to do. So what's pretty nice is we can now, while that's selected, we could double click the blend tool and have more options to look at. And I usually like to have the preview on so you can just check it out first. This smooth color is going to be like a custom gradient if you apply it in this way, like one shape over another shape, right? Or you can do specified steps. So if you click that, you can set how many steps, you know, and maybe it's like only 8 steps or something, right? And we zoom in, we can start to see those steps form, right? So taking this a step further, not only do we see those 2 original shapes, but we actually can modify those shapes still. So if we go up to the direct selection tool, not only can we like move the points, which I'm going to avoid for right now, but if we just click on the middle shape here, we could actually drag it around. And that trail that's forming in between is actually moving actively with it. And if we zoom out, we move that middle shape like all the way down to the other corner of the page, you can see like all those specified steps. So, you know, kind of going a step further here, if we wanted to have something kind of custom, like you see how this shape is starting to form something kind of interesting. Depends on what you're playing with, but say if we were to modify it to where we're getting more of that weird kind of custom effect like this. Say we really, the end goal is this. It's not either two of the shapes. Once we have something like that, we could just go to object and expand. And then everything is going to be grouped by, you know, right now we can't, everything's together. Just like type would be. So we would have to also ungroup. But then from that point on, we could just like delete everything else, you know, and we're just left with this like computer blended shape that came from two other shapes. So this is a pretty sweet process, but in this example, we only dealt with like 2 stars. What if you brought in a vector or an image of somebody's face and vectorized that and then blended somebody's face into like some other object? You know, what happens in that process? Could that help you convey whatever it is you're talking about? Right. And then thinking through this logical, like step by step, well, what if I copy the original shapes and, you know, do different things to each one of them? So, you know, building off some fun here. Anybody have questions with this tool? So, I mean, something simple like this. Oops. You know, if I have it like this, this could be a, you know, like a much cooler background than having like a white background or something, right? I mean, it took 5 seconds. So this is what I really urge you guys to be doing in all the programs we're kind of going through is like, yeah, I'm showing you how to do something, but like, how can you mess with it and use it for, you know, your own interests? So we're gonna, again, hide that layer. And then we're going to start a new layer. And this one we'll call color guide. And this color guide layer, let's do something fun. How about polygon tool? Let's get this bad boy out here. The polygon tool. And let's draw out this polygon. If you hold shift, it'll be a little bit more straight. Okay. And then once we have that, if we zoom in a little bit, so it's a little bit larger like this, let's go to edit, copy, and then edit, paste in place. And then just move it down, and you should get it kind of a smart guide. Move it down so like the edge is touching this other edge, kind of like we're going for like this honeycomb effect, right? And we should just do that all in one motion, like that drag. So if you had to move it and then use the arrows and stuff, like you should undo that. We're just doing a one drag. Okay. And then from that point on, we could do a Command C, which is copy. Command F, which is, I don't even think it's listed in the menu, which is paste in place. I think that one's listed. And then we're going to do Command D, which is transform again. So CFD. And we'll just do that a couple of times. So we have like, let's see how many. We'll do 5. So we just did that process once and then we just repeated it. That's all we did. So now that we have these 5 shapes, I want you guys to open the color guide panel. And if you don't have it open, which I think I had you guys close the first day, it's up just under the window and color guide. And under color guide, what's interesting is if you take this top shape and say you set it to, you know, like your favorite color or something, or color that you want to explore further, right? Say you're doing your project and you're like, man, you know what? I want to bring my whole project together so it has more of a design aesthetic. How do I make it look more cohesively? Like I made it, like I made it this way, right? I've designed it so everything works together, which is kind of what you should be thinking about to some extent. So it doesn't matter what color, you just pick a color. And then once you have that color set, up here in the color guide, there's this little indicator on the left. It says set base color to the current color. You just want to click on that, make sure it's selected. And then this drop down is all the different harmony rules that you have access to right in Illustrator. So you don't have to go on the web. You don't have to be copying RGB numbers, all this crazy business. Everything's here. So if you know, we don't cover color in this class. I think it's kind of redundant. A lot of people have basic understanding, but in terms of like the rules, right? These harmonies, maybe your project is about, you know, is conveying anger or sorrow or some, you know, like some kind of attitude. Well, maybe you just do a general Google search for like, what kinds of color harmonies convey anger, you know, and like you get that general idea that can help you outline your image and then say, okay, well, maybe it's this high contrast, right? So you just click on one of those rules, and then it's going to give you all these presets that you can be modifying or having for access. And then I want you to go down through and just, why is it not changing? My Illustrator may have pooped itself. Let me save and quit and reopen. Set base color. What's going on? Okay. Makes sense? So everybody works in different ways. One thing you could do is then, you know, make a copy of this off the screen and then you just have all of your colors kind of there, right? So if you ever wanted to change, you select a bunch of stuff, you want it to be that red color, then you just use the eyedropper tool and you can click that color. Some people like to make swatches. There is a swatch panel. You can make your own swatches and you can name them. And then that'll pop up here, so you always have access to that swatch. Anybody have questions with the tool, color guide? Okay. Let's hide that layer. And I think we have a couple more. This one, we can start a new layer, or I already did. I made one for background. So if you did that, we can just use that. But basically just make a new layer and call it gradient or background or whatever. And then just draw a single rectangle over the whole canvas. And then once we have that, we're gonna click the gradient tool and click our shape. Just a single click should do it. And then we're going to explore kind of how to manage the gradient tool and customize it. And the gradient tool has gotten really complex in the past few years. So it could be really awesome to play around with. And to be honest, maybe it could be more fun to, draw your own shape rather than a square. Like a pencil tool. So say we have this one shape, like you all have a shape, and then click the gradient tool, you click on it. Click. And once we have that default color plop in, we just need to open the gradient panel. If you don't have it up here, you could open it in the Windows panel. So this is generally about how I like to keep my window in Illustrator. Layers at the bottom, transparency right above it, my type stuff. We're going to get into Pathfinder in a few moments. And then all my color stuff at the top, like gradient, color guide. That's just how I've gotten used to using Illustrator, so I know where things are. So once we have that gradient panel open, we can kind of cover the basic principles here. First thing being that we have these little circles, these gradients, we hover over them, they're called gradient sliders. At the top, we have this little diamond here on this bar. And all of these three things are also listed right down here on our object. And so we could actually click on them and move them around. So not only the color, but actually like the little diamond is the transition of that color from one to another. We could change the endpoints down here if we want. But then up here, Or down here, you see, like if you hover just below the line, no matter whichever place you're looking, they'll give you like a little arrow with a plus. You could actually click and add another point. And then if you double click on that, you should be able to have the option of doing color, right? Changing the color if you double click one of these points. For instance, if you're opening this and it just shows gray, even though you're on the color palette, which is kind of obnoxious. The top right, the little menu bar, you just have to switch the color mode to RGB. It's a little annoying the first time you go in because it's defaulting to grayscale. Did everybody get that or miss it, or it could be confusing? So it's like any one of these little colors that we have, we're just needing to be on RGB and then we can modify it. And then, so not only can we move all these things around, or we could just use the gradient tool again and just redraw the angle at which we want it to be drawn, right? Like maybe we want it to be slightly different and we just keep trying to get the angle just perfectly by keep drawing. So beyond that, we also in the gradient panel have the option to change it to a radial gradient. And I think it was the introduction of Adobe CC. We have now freeform gradient, which is pretty awesome. Freeform gradient is a little bit more complex, uses more processing power, but it does have some pretty cool features in being able to kind of customize a shape. And you can add as many different color points as you want. So through this process, you can more or less kind of create a almost like a 3D object, you know? If you had some patience with moving the stuff around. Also, which could be fun is using a gradient on a stroke. So like if I took this shape and added a stroke, right, I can make that stroke larger. And by default, I don't know if you can actually apply the gradient right to, let's see, the stroke. Looks like maybe. But we don't have the option for a freeform gradient. However, there are these additional stroke gradient tools. So one of them is like inside out and so forth. I think the thing that we covered though is that just because this stroke appears as a stroke and it's not an actual object, we could actually expand the appearance of the stroke, and now it's its own object. I should probably go back first before it was a gradient though. Like a solid color. Solid color stroke, expand the appearance. So now it's a shape, and I think we should be able to apply a gradient now. Maybe. Ah, I see what's going on. So it's just a bunch of playing around. Like the stroke was a stroke, but now since it's an object, now I could go in there with like a freeform gradient. And I think it's giving me the option. I think my computer is just bogging down. I can hear the fan kick on. You know you need a new computer when? Sounds like it's wanting to be like a racehorse or a race car. Why did I say racehorse? Questions about gradients? Kind of confused why this didn't work right. Anyway, I've done it before. I'm not going to play with it. Last thing, so we just hide that. Let's make a new layer again. Let's drag this layer all the way to the top so it's above everything. And we're going to grab the type tool. And I want you guys to just actually, I learned from my mistake last time. Let's grab the rectangle tool first. And we're going to drag out a rectangle over the whole piece again. We don't need a stroke on this, just a color. Red's a little intense. I'm going to tone it down a bit here. And then grab our type tool. Actually, this is going to mess up. We're going to have to deselect this shape first, because if we use the type tool on the shape, it's just going to fill inside the shape, I think. So we drew the shape, we deselected it, we're grabbing our type tool, and then we're going to create a huge type box. I'm actually going to do it past the shape. And let's go ahead and make this larger type. I don't really know what. 75 might be good, something like that. Somewhere where we have still like dozen lines. Somewhere like that. And then I want you guys just to play, just as a recap of type. I want you guys to play with this so we have blocky type that fills most of the screen or most of the canvas and overlaps itself to the point where it's almost going to be unlegible. And as of right now, it's already unlegible because it's like, you know, here, let me type some words. Pickles. Now we're talking. Pickles. Block type. Can't see because of my window. There we go. Pickles, pickles, pickles. Arial black. That's how I wanted it to. That's okay. And then smaller still. And then I'm going to do full justify. Man, maybe I want to make this larger, smaller. Yeah. Now we're talking. I'm messing it up with the full justify. Wow, this just keeps skipping around on me. Anyway, you guys have something close, like blocky something? I didn't have everybody's image or photos up. You guys have blocky type on top of a background? Okay. I can only assume yes, even though I have no idea. The point here is that we're going to take this type and convert it now to a shape by expanding it. And then after we have that, what we're going to do is cut all of this type out all at once out of that background. Basically using the type as like a cookie cutter. So if you had to do this by hand, it would take you like a day, right? On a laser cutter, it might take you 20 minutes or something. We could do it in a few seconds. So we just need to have the Pathfinder window open, just under the window tab. And we're going to cover 3 different options here. The first one we're going to cover is just as like a wow factor. You guys are going to see how it can be pretty sweet all at once. And then we'll kind of recap a couple other options. So what we need to do though is select multiple objects. And right now we technically only have one object because as we expanded this, it's actually just moving around as one object. We never ungrouped it or anything, which is good. That's what we kind of want right now. But we also want the background. So if this is the only layer visible, we just need to do a select all, right? Or kind of drag over everything. Select the background color and the block type. Everybody get that? Okay. And so from this point on, the only thing we need to do is click this little one here called -front. And I mean, realistically right now, you probably should just see the white spaces. But then if you go ahead and turn on like all of these other layers that we hid, you should be able to see everything kind of showing through. Could add some transparency to it if you wanted.
Sorry, what do we press to get that?
So yep, we'll cover it a couple more times too. It's this -front when you have both shapes selected. And it's only going to work if you have, I'll cover it again. So I guess the point here is to see like how you can take this pretty complex task and just like simplify it instantly. And because we're using type, this project is about type. This is like another way to really quickly, get something going. And kind of stemming back to that notion of that notion of gradients, like this is now a gradient, or this is now a shape. So we could apply a gradient to it, and start doing all the same similar stuff we did with the gradient. It's kind of like compounding different tools. So if we want to isolate that Pathfinder and check it out a little bit more in detail, we could just hide everything, make a new layer again. And you just grab a couple of shapes out you guys can really see it. So I would suggest just doing like a rectangle and maybe a star. And it's always helpful to have different colors so you can really see what's going on. Cool. So these top options with Pathfinder, I think the ones that you'll really just benefit the most from are the first two. And these top options are separated from the bottom because once we click these, we don't have to do anything else. It's done. The process is done. So for example, if we select both of these and we hit the unite, it's just going to combine the shapes. We're not going to have any overlapping paths or anything. It's now just a new shape, right? If we hit undo, Command Z, we do the second option, which is the minus front. We get just exactly kind of what it sounds like. We're cutting the front object out of the back object, right? And then if we undo a third time and we go to the divide, which is on the bottom, as soon as we click it, you should see like a very, very minimal change in the line stroke and stuff, the selection. The effect actually has taken place, but we don't see it because it's not supposed to do anything other than slice the objects around where they're overlapping. So to really see it, we would want to grab the selection tool, deselect first, right? So everything's not selected. And then we would want to move a piece. But just like type, when we take a smart object and we expand it, it's grouped together. So anytime you have this kind of thing going on, you just have to go to ungroup, right? Have that selected, you go to ungroup, and then everything should move individually. So this is a really easy way to take, like, if you have a positive of something you need and you want a negative, it's a quick way to do that. If you have, for example, if I have this like pool of letters, right? I have this huge crazy madness, and then I have type on a path, and I fill this with a bunch of crap. Let's say it's 20 points. Boom. So I have all this crap, and you know what? It doesn't need to be all this because I realistically just need it to be one object. Well, you can expand it, and then you could just pathfind it. And then it's no longer, individual pieces. It's just one unified shape. And that could be a fun way to do something new too, you know? Like I just did that at random, but then I zoom in and I realize, oh, this is kind of an interesting little shape here. You know, so Pathfinder is a little trickier to grasp, but it's not hard by any means. It's just a matter of like playing with it. And it is now like one of the required tools that I'm having you guys use for the project. So you definitely want to have it implemented somewhere, whether it's like a texture over top of something instead of a solid color, or it's a background layer, or you're building a composite like this, you know.